Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
Go above and beyond.
they become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%.
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
With Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. Today I have Matt Shields. He created a company called Epic Hearts. It's a platform to showcase the return to participation in performance sports after a heart attack. And Matt grew up, exploring the outdoors and developing a passion for riding, bicycles. He actually reached high performance levels in road cycling, competing in Europe. But at age 40, he suffered a major heart attack when he was starting to go for a bike ride or a run. Matt's going to talk about his personal story and his connection to Heart Research Australia. From a heart attack to cycling 433 kilometers across New Zealand. Amazing. Heart research, technology, and sheer determination. Matt has now created an amazing system whereby he helps people that have heart conditions. So we're gonna talk about that and go through his history. And welcome, Matt.
My software, which is called MyLM, I'm the founder and CEO of MyLM, and that software is used to track products like stents in the medical supply chain. So that's the kind of the thing that came out of my my journey.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, all right, your software tracks the usage and deployment of stents. Is that what it's about?
Yeah, through the supply chain, from like factories, warehouses, right through to hospitals and potentially customers, which are the patients or the surgeons. So.
Well, what happens now? Is there, is inventory not kept very well? Like, what are some of the problems that necessitated you making the software?
Yeah, well, a lot of the problems is that the supply chains around the world, once they leave places like America, they arrive in other countries like Australia, and there's not real good traceability systems, and often people like sales reps do the stock taking. So there's not much visibility inside the hospital wall. So my technology makes that possible by using things like RFID to automate the process and create sort of real-time visibility for not just the sales reps of, say, the stent companies like Abbott, but also the hospital teams like the theatre nurses and scouts on the floor who are actually putting these life-saving products in people. So that's kind of what we're bringing to the table here through the MyLM.
Well, what happens right now? Is there over-ordering by hospitals? Are there shortages? Does it delay operations? What happens?
That's right, yeah. So there's a whole lot of impacts, through oversupply products. Parts expire because they only have limited shelf life because their nature being sterile. There's these items that could be in one theatre and possibly just across or down the corridor. There could be similar parts that no one knows about. So there's huge supply issues within hospitals right now, especially in the public system. There's a lot of redundancy in the system. And that obviously adds up to the increasing cost of healthcare because of, oversupply of goods.
How many different kinds of stents are there? Is it, and are they differentiated by size or length or?
It's a really good point. So there's many different types of stents. You've got, one of the ones. So like if we get into my story, I've got this cardiac stent, which is made of a different type of materials. Like they're normally made of cobalt chrome. They're kind of a balloon expanding stent. And then you've got other ones which are self-expanding stents, which kind of go in your legs, for vascular disease. So there's a couple of different flavors of stents, and these things come with either bare metal stents or even drug-eluting. They've impregnated with different types of chemistries on the coatings to help them be absorbed into the body better.
So when someone's going to have a stent, what's the current cascade of things that happen? What's the request system look like? How long does it take to get a stent? Like, who goes and looks in the box in the warehouse and pulls out the right stent? I know it's not like that, but what's it like?
Yeah, it is. It is pretty much like that. Like, it's sort of like you imagine yourself walking into a library, and all these products are lined up on the shelf, and they often go in ranges of diameters and lengths, and often amongst those the lots, batches or expiry dates are kind of hidden. So you often find that people are grabbing products, because the nature of, sort of like cardiac surgeries or vascular ones. Often you grab something that fits, the right size, an artery can be different diameters. So often things are getting grabbed and pulled off the shelves in no order. And often things, you just sit there and can expire if they're a certain size or maybe if a batch needs to be recalled. It's very hard to look at the serial number and read that. It's impossible if you're a theatre nurse, to see. So obviously there's a lot of, issues around labeling and things like that.
So if you have a metal stent, I guess you'd worry about oxidation. If you have a multi-factor stent or a stent that's composed of multiple materials, I don't know. I mean, I guess they need to be stored in certain humidity, dryness, away from light. If they have drugs impregnated in them, the drugs have a shelf life. There could be contamination. Like, who is accounting for how the stents should be stored, how long they last, and everything?
Yeah. Well, that's all sort of controlled. When a medical implant is, goes to the FDA or a similar regulatory body, there's all sort of conditions around the type of product. If it's a newer product, that might be on a trial or a pilot. Once it's manufactured, the product's actually aging, and that's process before it's even put into sterilization is like a clock ticking. So every product you've got, and a lot of these medical devices, around the planet are all on consignment. So basically, the cost is weighed by the supplier of the parts, and for many of the time they have no visibility of where these are. So if you can have a better sort of indication of, so like a heat map or reporting or dashboards, and what we're doing here is creating these command centers, which will allow all the personas and stakeholders to actually have better insights into their sales or decision making, which is going to create a lot of efficiencies throughout the system.
What's your benchmarking? Like, what metrics of the stent process are really in need of help in your software? What has it changed? The delivery time, the overage supply. I mean, what metrics have you looked at?
Well, there's a lot of key ones. You just mentioned there, say from delivery time, looking at from the factory. Often a lot of these parts are made in many sites where there's a whole supply chain of raw materials, and then they're all fed into like big distribution centers, sort of in Europe or in America, and then they're farmed off to the supplier countries. So even between, from the factory to the distribution centers, and then as they cascade down this waterfall, by the time they arrange themselves into like countries, say like Australia, there's things that happen to the products. Some end up getting consumed, others get damaged on the way there. There's not much sort of feedback in the system, and often the cost of returning these products is lost, and also with the information that might come from people like on the teams. Imagine right now you have a box of pacemakers or something like that has turned up and they haven't been treated well, or there's information on those around the quality. It doesn't often get fed back to the manufacturing site. So what we're hoping to do here is create sort of dialogue around the part transfer at a granular level, like we call it a UDI or unique device level. And that's where the point of difference is what we're doing here is we're creating this ability to track things at a granular level for uniqueness.
Well, so if a hospital is getting stents from multiple places, how do they know? So, I mean, there's no feedback mechanism to say like, oh, these stents that we got from, company A were problematic, but these stents from company B were much better, and then change how they're ordering and the amounts they're ordering?
It is, yeah. Like it's a funny system because like what you might imagine in a hospital is that basically they'll say, oh, I need this range of products. These type of patients are coming in, and it'll be sort of on a tender-based process. So people apply, I've got a product that meets the specs here. And then what happens, you've got the sales rep, they're in the theatres with the surgeons and the patients, and they look after cases. So often a lot of the feedback actually comes back through like sales reps, working on the floor, getting information saying, oh, this product, it's defective, or this one's really good, and let's make more of these. It's very hard to get that information fed back up the supply chain, back to either marketing or manufacturing. So yeah, there's a lot of disparity throughout the system, and it's a complex model that these companies are working in.
Yeah, this isn't good though, because patient outcomes could be, influenced tremendously by good or bad equipment. So if you've got stents, like let's say it's critical that your hospital has a certain percentage patient outcome for stenting, and the stents you get, you're not tracking, and you get a batch that's bad, or and you just continue to order that one, and that lowers your your patient outcome metric substantially. I mean, that could like ruin your funding, all kinds of stuff. You won't get awards. I mean, it seems like this needs to be paid attention to, for various reasons.
It is, and also like when you think about it, like the scale of this is really quite incredible. We talked about like sort of the time of tracking products and things expiring, but it comes down to actually these huge numbers. And this is something, I guess, where people often don't know that, cardiovascular disease is sort of like 1 out of every 3 deaths. It's 31% of deaths globally, and related to heart disease and heart attacks. Out of that, it's sort of like 4 out of 5 deaths. So I think in America there was something like 805,000 related deaths to cardiovascular disease, and when you look at this on a global level, there's probably something like I think it's 17.9 million people died related to coronary artery disease in 2019. So it's pretty staggering numbers there.
Well, I should ask you right off the bat, how did you get this idea, and why is this important to you? Why have you worked on the software?
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating story. Like my background from the CSRIO, working in the space science division, where we actually developed technologies like Wi-Fi and building big telescopes, led to this invention. And so when I sort of stepped back to where this all started from, we were trying to build a telescope in the West Australian desert called ASCAP. And this telescope was an array of dishes that all look up into space for tracking things like black holes and pulsars. And what they needed was a database to track individual components, which made the telescope up. So I'd been working on this project for about 10 years, and I was sort of looking for a change, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And then this one winter morning on the 12th of July in 2016, I was going to run to work, my usual 15-kilometre run to work down the highway. And I got up and I started this run, and straight away into the run, I suffered a massive heart attack.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It was like a shotgun to the chest. Like I all of a sudden stopped in my tracks, and I'm there on the side of the road, like sitting in the gutter, like dying. And I pulled out my phone and I called for the emergency, and I just said, I think I'm having a heart attack.
Yeah.
And these guys, I said, hey, we've got an ambulance coming, and we're coming for you. Just wait there. And I remember really quite clearly sitting there on the side of the road, and there wasn't anyone around. I was on my own. There was no one there, and I could actually see a car coming, and I'm like, oh, this is it. It's like, no, we're still. And then this car comes and parks next to me, and they open the doors, and then they put these bags down, and these cups of coffee go down, and then they pick up their coffee cups and they run off to the train station. I was just left on the side of the road going, I can't believe it. I'm dying here, and no one's going to help me. And at that point, I realized, it was all about me, and it was only me who was going to get me through. And the ambulance did arrive, and we headed off down the highway into the teams at the ICU at a hospital called Royal North Shore in Sydney. And basically what happened, the team was ready. They were waiting for me to come in through. And when we landed in the theatre, there was a whole bunch of people, a bit like the Interlad in like blue spacesuits, and they injected this dye into my bloodstream, which was displayed on an enormous TV screen. It was kind of like watching IMAX, at the movies, but it was my heart on the screen. And the way I like to think about it for like the people listening here, it's sort of a bit like, imagine you're scuba diving in the ocean, and there's these bits of coral. It's sort of like a fan coral. And I remember the heart, it should have lots of vessels and things. It was like completely like someone had chopped the trunk off it. There was no blood flow, and I knew this was pretty bad. Yeah, it was kind of like, this ain't good here. And there was people attaching big things for defibrillators and sticking a drill in my arm and connecting all these pipes up, and I'm kind of conscious and watching all this happen in real time. And then they took this catheter, and they introduced it into my right arm in an area of the radial artery. And then they insert this guide wire.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
And this little guide wire goes up your arm and then through into your heart. And you're looking at it on the screen, and there's basically they discover there's this big branch of the heart where the coronary artery, it's called the left arterial artery, descending artery, LAD, was shut off. And that's what they call the Widowmaker.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so the Widowmaker, hence to that, can be actually worse than a standard Widowmaker. There's a thing called a STEMI. So a STEMI is like a elevated ST wave when you look at the signals, but it was a complete 100% blockage. So basically, from the time I'd called the ambulance and I had that heart attack, my heart was dying. So there was no oxygen getting to the bloodstream. And what happened is that they, through this guide wire, they put a balloon into my artery, and they then expanded the artery walls open. So they apply some pressure, which blows open the artery from where it's basically been shut off. And then this is where the really cool part, where the magic happens, is that the stent, this is where this Abbott Zion stent is introduced through that artery and into my heart. And then they put it into position, and then they literally deployed the stent. It's kind of like expands into the artery, holding it open. And that
were you able to watch this on the screen?
I was watching all this live. It was like I had a front row seat to my entire life. It was incredible. And the once the stent went in, the pain went away, and it just felt like, I think I'm going to be okay now. I think this is going to be all okay.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was pretty amazing. Like what was the hard thing about it? That I thought I was actually in really good condition. I just turned 40. I've been training for some running events, and this thing just came out of the blue. And what I didn't know about is, and this is the tricky point, you might survive the heart attack, but the hardest bit actually happens after the heart attack. Like this was only the easy bit I was to find out.
Why? What do you mean?
So, I guess, we spoke about some statistics earlier, so like 805,000 people in America might have a heart attack. And, the average age is sort of in their 60s, like 64 or 65. And for women, it's a little bit older. But one of the hard things is that I think in America, I know that a lot of women have worse outcomes than men. There's a lot of, there's not as good care. But between both, a lot of people, when they have a heart attack, they actually don't live very long after they have either heart damage, or they need a pacemaker, or their electrical signals have been stuffed up. So you can't get back to living life. And back to kind of the dialogue and the story that we're working on here is that how did I kind of turn this around to get back into this position to, build this app? I was literally in ICU. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And then I woke up the next morning, and I decided, it's like, if I get out of this hospital, I want to dedicate my life into healthcare and building some app that's going to change the world and fix these problems around parts arriving in hospitals, and that's sort of what I did literally on the spot that next morning.
That's cool. But why that? Was it? Did you have a problem where they didn't have the right stent for you, or how did you have that intuition that that's what you needed to do in particular?
Yeah, well, sort of at the time, I felt like I knew I wasn't going to be able to return to work. So I moved out of the city down to a very small coastal town with a couple of thousand people. And, it was going to take a long time to recover. My heart had no oxygen going to it for over an hour. And the heart damage, they said, mightn't be repairable. So they said, no more running or riding. I used to do a lot of sporting pursuits, and then they said also, this is going to change your life. You might be able to go back to work. So I started thinking like, if it's going to be about anything I know, it's like I want to do something that's going to make a difference to people. So basically, what I started looking at was like, well, I need to get strong, and my work said to me, is like, take some time off, and that opened up my thought patterns to literally, how do I do something that's really, really cool on a global scale with technology? And that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, well, the reason why I ask is I've thought, myself,
I'm not trying to turn this into me, but we're doing the podcast. What can I do in science? So that's why I ask you, because what's the best use of your talents? So it sounds like it's not sitting in a lab and just researching, fundamental research. You decided the best use of your talents was software, which is cool, but it's unusual, I guess, that you decided it in the moment. So that's why I asked.
It was an instantaneous decision. Like, I had this thought in my head of like, well, how can I do this? And the fact I'd seen it done with like Wi-Fi, I worked in the lab with this team developed, a technology inside Sydney, which has gone global. Like, I'd seen it done before, the relevance of this telescope, like looking into the galaxy, finding, black holes. This sort of got me inspired to say, well, imagine right now, this is my one chance at life again. I don't know how long I've got. I'm going to try and make it count. And so what my next step is when I returned to work was I need to find a sponsor. I need to do this. And my team said to me, "Is like, well, Matt, you're going to have to leave behind your current position in the space group and work for another department and find an investor." And luckily enough, I found an investor in the project, and then we started to build it. And this led to me heading to the Bay Area. I went over to San Francisco. I met with some development teams in the US and started getting some ideas around building a product that could actually scale and become a best-selling app on the App Exchange.
Yeah, well, that's very cool. So it's right now, like, where is the app at? It's being used, and again, what are some of the success metrics that you've you can show right now? How well is it working?
Yeah. Well, I guess it comes down to, how do you actually find out the relevance of the product? And this is sort of before we sort of step back into the technology side of things. I started actually spending a lot of time in the operating theatre. So I was working side by side with some surgeons on my own journey. And actually out of this, through a bit of diagnostics, it led me to this understanding of like a lot of patient outcomes detrimented due to people not acting quick enough or parts not available. So, we spoke about time before, and that's one of the things I wanted to do here is create a technology which was really good at tracking time and how long things take to get to places that are important. So what I started looking through this was, well, maybe this stent that I got, maybe it could have got there quicker. Like, what happened if it didn't turn up there? And this allowed me to actually look into the supply chains of hospitals, and where I found out I had this Abbott stent. So my next step was I should really get in contact with Abbott and ask them if I can come and meet the team and give a little talk on what I'm doing. So I got to actually present in front of the team at Abbott there, and these guys gave me some insights on some of the problems. So what we started doing is working towards a series of goals related from the hospital perspective, but right through to the manufacturing supply chain. And this is where the evolution of the technology actually started to become really quite interesting.
So again, what specifics can you point to numerically? Like, was the average lead time 2 weeks and now it's 8 days? Are you at that point where you now have some aggregate data that shows, okay, the software saved 46 million in delays, or, again, it reduced the average waiting time from this to this? Do you have any of those metrics? Are you at that point yet?
Yeah, I guess in our point right now, we're really looking at very, very specific use cases around moving stock between certain parts of sites, moving things in the supply chain. Like, the value is, it's really quite hard to tell if you're in a hospital environment, where these things are moving, just because you don't own the stock. They're on consignment here. So a lot of things we're trying to pin down use cases and business models, which are quite new to people solving the problem. So that kind of stuff we've got the data on, been working in various locations on the testing, and it will be kind of available in the near future. But the key kind of component here, which is really the exciting part, this is where a lot of these companies are heading now, and especially with Abbott, they're moving into directions of diagnostics and testing and things like AI, and being able to actually pick things up around these trends. One of the key components here is that when people ask me, why did this happen to you? And it's like, well, at the time I didn't know, but this is all comes back to things like genetics and diet and things that are actually you're in control of. So a bit like the technology of knowing where your products are moving and where they've come from. The problems that we're seeing here in the world, which is affecting like a third of the population, they're all correctable. These kind of things that I discovered for me, like was related to my cholesterol, was related to my diet. It's all small tweaks that can be done, to recorrect yourself. And that's a bit like anything, if you don't have the information, you can't make good decisions.
No, that's true. That's true. So what's next for the software? Where do you want to take it from here? I mean, I spoke to a guy, it's been a while, but he was focused on managing the inventory of medicines in hospitals. And there was like a whole host of reasons why that would be, tremendously beneficial. So, I mean, maybe a partnership with someone like that, or in addition to stents, maybe you go into all the medical devices and, why not increase this system for all of them? It would really it would probably help a hospital's bottom line, big time,
It will. And that's our plan. The whole program is behind basically medical devices and the supply chain for any prosthesis. We're talking here from, not just pacemakers and stents, right through to all parts of orthopedics and other applications. The way the thing that has been designed, it's based on a series of standards. People are familiar with things like the GS1s for barcoding. It's all based around those kind of protocols, and that allows you to even right down to track an avocado or a car. It's all the same. It's a product, and we just track it through as a whole series of processes through locations and ownership models. So what we're going to do here is once we've sort of tested out this pilot within Australia over the next 12 months or so, the idea is to actually start pushing globally and try and get this product out onto the market and create some impact, through into the US and other parts of Europe. So there's a lot of exciting times ahead.
Where can people go to find out more that have listened? Obviously, if they're part of a hospital, it makes total sense. Even if they're not, where can they go to, again, see your progress and keep tabs?
Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff available at the moment since we're in kind of spin out or startup mode from CSRIO. The best way to go is to type in CSRIO and MyLM. So that's CSRIO, MyLM, and we've got a whole series of information and flyers there. Basically, there's a whole swag of use cases depending if you're a manufacturer or a hospital. Like what we're looking at over the next year or so is to develop this company and to mention, we've created a startup company, which is the 181st startup out of CSRIO. So for me, it's a big step away from a job working with scientists and astronomers and a huge research institution to founding a company and becoming a tech startup guy. So it's kind of going to be an interesting couple of years ahead.
Excellent. Well, Matt, thanks for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.